now then, it is about 6:30. I've been up for 15-20 minutes. Currently the missus is out walking the dog, and I am sat in my lovely bedroom bay window just exposing myself to a little bit of sunlight. Now this might sound insignificant, it's not, and I thought I'd mention it briefly. The exposure to sunlight in the morning can quite greatly alter certain different reactions in your body. Now, we've heard about circadian rhythm before. Sunlight has a big impact on this. Just simply exposing your eyes to sunlight in the morning can have a big impact on your normal sleep patterns, your hormone regulation, your blood pressure and body temperature, things like reaction time and your physical performance can greatly increase with this exposure to sunlight. And besides all of that physical thing as well, I find a big relationship between exposure to the sunlight in the morning and my general positivity and efficiency during the day. I give myself 10 minutes just to sit in this bay window and expose myself to this sunlight before I start the day. Generally after I've done my stretches here as well. And it gives me time to reflect. It gives me time to think about things that I want to do during the day. So my office is in another room, which is a little bit darker, and that's where I got all my work done. But it's always nice to give myself 10 minutes just looking out the window and taking in some sunlight. Today's video content is how to set up your day and set up your turbo sessions to get the absolute most out of that session. Turbo sessions are not just about ticking boxes. It's not a ticking boxes game. And what I mean by that is it's not just a case of, okay, well, I've done it this day. I've done a VO2 max session this day. I've done a sprint session this day. Because the difference in what you can get out of a session, depending on how you approach it and how hard you can push, can be quite significant. So here are 5 certain tips that I've got. And to be honest as well, this fits more so now that we're in lockdown, quarantine, because it's specifically relatable to when maybe you've got, you're working from home and you've got all day to factor in a training session. You're maybe not sure on timing or what to eat. So things like that to consider. Tip number 1. So my first tip revolves around timing of the session. Making sure that you are doing the session in an appropriate time or at an appropriate time where you can completely devote your physical but also mental capacity to that session. Now, what you don't want to be doing is approaching that session thinking, okay, I've got a quick hour spare here, I'm just going to stick my session in now. If you're approaching a session with that mentality, you're already in a position to fail. You're already in a position to be exposed to external influences, things that are playing on your mind, things that you maybe forgot to do, and so on and so forth. So my first tip would be to allocate a certain slot in the day, logical perspective, which works best for you in terms of better in the morning. That needs to be in the morning. But make sure that you allocate that time in the day to completely commit yourself to that session. You need to admit to yourself that no matter what else is going on with work, with the family or anything like that, you need to appreciate that time in the day is your time to yourself, your time to perform, and your time to commit.
might well be one of my favourite roads around East Yorkshire. It's also a little catchment for the sun, and I'm a bit sheltered from the wind here, so I figured I'd have a little chat with you. I'm out on a ride. I've done some efforts near home, and then I've stuck my backpack on because I have to go to Driffield to my accountant's to drop a file of my end of year accounts off.
Tip number 2.
Simply put, make sure you're training hard enough. It sounds easy to say, and it sounds an obvious one, but too many people are training at not the right intensity. And what I mean by that is too many people are training at this intensity which is hard enough to develop a certain rate of fatigue, but not hard enough to elicit a specific enhanced training adaptation. Now, if you think about training, the bigger the adaptive response to that training stress. Now, the bigger that stress, the big. Let's take as an example, you are doing some 3-minute efforts. You're doing 4 times 3-minute efforts. Now, last time you did those, you did them at 400 watts. And you go into it and you've got that number in your head and you just try and hit that number if you can. You'll think, oh, 390 watts will do, I'm still pushing myself. Well, that's okay, and that'll be okay, be good enough to maintain. But if you want to really enhance your performance, you actually need to be going into that session with a completely different mindset. You need to be analysing the data from the previous session, figuring out, okay, last time I did 400 watts on average, so this time I'm going to enhance that by 5 watts as a minimum. So I'm going to go off and I'm going to do the first effort at 405 watts. And then hopefully you'll be able to do all 4 at 405 watts because you've adapted since that previous training session. And this is obviously my job as a performance coach with all of my athletes, is to be consistently monitoring this. So for every single training session they're doing, it's a question of, right, do we need to be enhancing the powers? Yes or no? And if so, by what percentage? It obviously depends on where you are in the training block, if you're fresh going into the session, what you've done the day before or what's happening the day after. Make sure your efforts are hard enough to elicit appropriate adaptive response, and progressing the sessions in that manner, but also obviously structuring the workouts to utilise certain training adaptations. Yo, hey boy, hold in.
Tip number 3.
So the next little tip, I'm sure I've got helmet hair now, I don't care. It works in with the timing thing which I was talking about earlier actually, which is with regards to the timing of nutrition and specifically carbohydrates around your workout. Now, going back to timing, one common mistake a lot of people make is they might have a full day at work. They eat their lunch at, let's say, 12:30. They come home and then they try and do a turbo session at, say, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night. Obviously, you've got a big window there between lunch at 12:30 and your session where blood sugar levels start to drop. Just better way of doing it is manipulating that a little bit to make sure that you have another feed, either at the other half of your lunch or another little snack at, let's say, 3 o'clock, just to spike your blood sugar levels up a little bit. Another mistake some people make is actually not training until after their evening meal. So they might get home at, say, 5, 6, have their tea at 6:30, and then go and try and train at 7:30. Now, two reasons that's not good. One, you've still got a full stomach full of food, and there'll be a lot of blood trying to digest that food when instead it should be trying to propel your muscles. The other thing as well is training quite late at night. It's never going to be good for your sleep pattern. But yeah, the better way of doing it is to get back from work once you've had a little snack an hour before, train, and then have that evening meal as the kind of post-workout recovery meal, as it were. But yeah, regardless of timing protocols or when you do your session, you should always make sure that you have a little small snack, maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours before, which is predominantly carbohydrate based. So a classic example is yesterday when I did a turbo session at 11 o'clock. I had quite an early breakfast yesterday at 6:30, which was very low carbohydrates. And that was just enough to pick my carbohydrate up, circulating blood glucose. And about an hour before the session, about 10 o'clock, I had just a white bagel with I did the session, then I had my lunch as like the post-workout recovery meal, and that works really well in terms of manipulating that carbohydrate around that workout. Tip number 4. So this is my setup. Basically, I'm doing the session on a watt bike. And thank you very much to Ed at Viva La Velo, because he officially owns this. I do my bike fits and my testing on this when it's at the shop, but because we're in lockdown, Ed's let me borrow it for the time being. He's not going to use it for a little bit of time. Normally I do my sessions at my gym because they have a watt bike, but obviously because the gym's shut, I can't do that. So got the watt bike set up outside. The reason I've got it outside is just to get the fresh air in me. There's a bit of wind today, and it's nice to get a bit of sun on the skin. And then in front of the watt bike, I've got my Wahoo headwind set up, which is blowing directly at my face as I am sat on the watt bike. Got the watt bike screen there, obviously that'll display my data, but I've also got a little Garmin mount there, which I'll have my Garmin on. I've also got a table there, which I'll just stick my sweat towel on. Now, what I've just told you may sound fairly insignificant. You might be thinking, okay, why is he telling me about, how he has a sweat towel at the side of him, or why is he telling me about the direction of his fan? But it's all these little things which add up in a session, which can soon improve your rate of perceived effort, and therefore make you be able to go harder for longer and get more out of the session. I've had clients who have told me that, I've done this session, but I forgot my water bottle. So after half an hour, I was gasping for a drink, and the rest of the session was compromised because of it. Well, that's not an excuse. You need to make sure that if you've realized that you've forgotten your bottle, get off the bike, go and get your bottle, have a good drink, and make sure that session's not compromised. But I mean, to be honest, you shouldn't even get to that stage. You should be in a state where you've got a tick list in your head. You need your bottle, or even two. You need maybe some electrolytes in that bottle. You need a sweat towel. You need your fan in a certain position, and all of these little things can all add up to that couple of percent, which will give you the most out of that session.